Hello, my name is Tom Swiftbird, and this is an, as of yet, unnamed podcast, nameless podcast, episode 1 that I would like to use to explore some issues. A little bit about me: I've been a writer for a very long time, and it was suggested to me by a friend of mine. A lot of people, they're not so about reading anymore, but why don't you try a different format? Try an audio format. And I was pretty resistant to that for a while. I don't really like the sound of my own voice, but I figured I would give it a try. And so, for this initial podcast, I would like to talk some about some issues surrounding the protests in North Dakota over the Dakota Access Pipeline. Now, to give just a short rundown on this pipeline, it's a line that was proposed to run near Bismarck at first, but then it was cried foul that perhaps this will poison the water of 100,000 people, and the solution to this was just to move it down by Standing Rock Reservation, because I guess all those natives are seen as disposable, and this is unacceptable, and it's a prime example of a term called environmental racism, which we can see going back in this country, America, for quite a long ways, way back to where reservations were called natural sacrifice zones, and were okay to be polluted by uranium, as we can see in some places in the Southwest. And yeah, we're more or less seen as just acceptable places to offload the costs of pollution. This is a very unacceptable thing, and a thing that I think is right to be opposed, where you have a handful of people at the top of some corporation making a ton of money off something like an oil pipeline, and they get to offload all the risks on so many rural people, so many Native American populations. And so this has been opposed for a long time now. Actually, you probably have to go back to the Keystone XL pipeline to even begin to understand it. And the Keystone pipeline was interesting because the whole coalition of natives and rural ranchers came together, and they blocked it, and they won that battle. And in many ways, Dakota Access Pipeline is Keystone 2.0. It's Keystone rebranded. And so that's the fight that's been going on up there. I have a lot of friends who've been camped up there for a long time, taking part in many peaceful, nonviolent actions that are constantly demonized, that are constantly misrepresented, and just the show of force on the side of Dakota Access and the law enforcement, who have become more or less subcontractors for this oil company. And even the media seems to take these reports from the police, who are basically operating on the side of the oil company, and the media, at least locally for the most part, doesn't question them. I mean, they're almost just stenographers for the powers that be in North Dakota. But through a bunch of independent media, through citizen journalism, everyone possessing a phone, the word is getting out there quite a bit, and the truth is spreading. So that's just the context of what I want to talk about today. What I want to talk about today is really why anyone should oppose an oil pipeline, or kind of what the big deal about this is. And it's a context that I've noticed in having conversations that people don't always easily grasp. And so This is gonna kind of riff off a piece that I wrote called "We Are Nature. An attack on the environment is attack on human communities." So, speaking on protests in North Dakota staged at Standing Rock Reservation over the construction of the Dakota Access oil pipeline, the American Indian Movement leader, Dennis Banks, had this to say: "When they threaten the environment, they're threatening you. We are part mountain. We are part ocean. We are part river. We are part flower and grass and tree. All of this, we are part of all of it. So that when they threaten the environment any place, they're threatening you." And in one sense, nothing could be more unalienable and self-explanatory. Human beings exist within a great chain of multisplendent flora and fauna, within a wonderful array of seismic, hydrological, chemical, meteorological, climatological processes. As a species, we are inside everything in nature and outside nothing. Dial any of nature's processes up or down, even slightly, and human existence, human society, human civilization faces massive change and disruption. We need the sun. Our planet's distance from the sun provides a temperature range where life can flourish. The sun provides energy for plants to metabolize through photosynthesis. No ecosystem exists without plants, and without plants, every other being tumbles into non-existence, there being no sources of food for anything living. We need the land in a state of arability so we can farm and grow. Without rich topsoil to grow things, famine rules the land. We need water, clean and drinkable, non-toxic to the biology of everything from a plant to a person. Any person goes without water about 3 days, they will die. We need every step of the ecosystem, the various creatures and plants, in so many ways often unforeseen but critical. Just look what the extinction of bees may do to the entire earthly system of life. I can't make this point enough. We are nature. We are inside of it all. We are a part of it all. Our existence of human beings depends on and is affected by every process and living entity that collected together we call nature. And again, in one sense, nothing could be more unalienable and self-explanatory. Yet in another sense, in a sense that may be the default view of technological industrial society, no concepts more alien or hard to understand than our own human connectedness to nature. Many of us live in a world abstracted from nature. Intellectually, we could assent to the fact that we would die without water, that we need a cornucopia of sustenance from the soil to be healthy, that breathing air burdened by 1,000 toxins will kill us, if not immediately, then probably of some kind of cancer as our years in the poisoned air accumulate. Yet many of us, especially in the modern industrial world, are removed several layers from the necessity and vitality of nature that undergirds our everything as human beings. These basic facts of human existence remain merely an intellectual thing, as if we are several stories up a massive tower, where it is hard to even see miles below to the foundation our whole structure depends upon. We can logically assent to there being a foundation, but often don't connect with it in a way that registers as being of high importance. The cause and effect is not so easy to see when we live in glass and concrete megaliths, surrounded by so many miracles of the progression and knowledge of science, our electrical grids, modern medicine, blocks of asphalt, the domicile cell works of apartments and suburbs, the water that appears from the tap almost as if magic, seemingly infinite and summit with ease, the grocery store housing every variety of food. It all has an obscuring effect on much of society. It is hard to see our human roots in the water, earth, and air through so many abstractions of convenience. This fog of abstractions is so thick that many people simply cannot see through it and ask questions like, why would you fight an oil pipeline? And the answer is simple, yet perhaps needs reiteration, because it would poison the water, and really, water is life. What would any of us be without clean water? Water is a foundation, and every single other thing we may stand for topples without clean water to drink. Our human communities are not separate from their most foundational needs for water, air, and soil. The roots might be hard to see, as far advanced into the rarefied clouds propelled by technology and progress that we have risen. Yet sever those roots of water, earth, and air, and all this comes crashing down quickly. We eventually find we are part of the chain we are so determined to poison and dominate. In a sense, this should not need to be explained, yet the fog of abstractions has removed many of us so far from the viscerality of the natural world human communities are inextricably dependent on. So I think maybe some benefit does exist here in going back to step one. We are nature. Our communities are nature. Our well-being will be forever tied with the health of the rivers, the oceans, the mountains, the forests, the soil, until the day comes where we can drink toxic potpourri instead of water, till the day comes where we can subsist on desertification rather than the fruits of the earth, until the day comes where we can breathe the contents of poison smog instead of air. Then we need to care about what happens to all these things for the sake of ourselves, for the sake of our families and communities, and for the sake of the generations that will follow us. And for all the technological marvels and wonderment this society has bestowed on its inhabitants, there is one place I think it has often significantly erred, and that error is viewing humankind as separate from all the naturalistic processes we are always and have always been encompassed within. It is foolish to think we can destroy or pollute with impunity and think it will not eventually come back around to hurt us most of all. For how backward and primitive industrial society thought Native Americans were throughout history, many natives understood this basic human connectedness to the natural world, like a quote from Chief Seattle will illustrate. All things are bound together, all things connect. Whatever happens to the earth happens to the children of the earth. Man did not weave the web of life, he is merely a strand in it. Whatever he does to the web, he does to himself. So, to come full circle to what is occurring right now at Standing Rock and many front lines for indigenous struggles around the world, I think many of us retain some understanding of this basic truth of connectedness. Even if we walk in two worlds and adopt some of the technological world to fit our current situations, we still understand our communities will suffer and die if the natural world is poisoned, if the clean air, water, and soil is allowed to be desecrated with toxins. And though it may be hard to see beyond the fog of all the abstractions of convenience, I do wish more people would try to connect to these basic necessities of water, soil, and air, realize how important they are to protect, how much more infinitely precious they are than the temporary monetary gains of a handful of persons at the top of an organization like an oil corporation. And this is not just an indigenous issue or struggle, though it does tend to affect those of us in indigenous communities lopsidedly, as we are toward the bottom of society and seen as an acceptable place to offload the risks of these oil ventures. It is something that affects everyone as soon as they see past the fog of abstractions and realize the foundation every human thing rests upon is air, water, and soil. Air, water, and soil is everything and needs to be protected. And so that's all I have for this initial issue of whatever this podcast may eventually come to be called, if it's a continuing thing. Just trying to go back to step one, trying to explain to people why care about what happens to the environment. And I do think once people realize how much a foundation, their whole existence depends on the health of the environment, I do think it is something that needs cared about. But especially for people in kind of modern industrial society, there is a fog in the way of seeing all that, and so hopefully this has helped clear that fog just a little bit. And keep fighting, keep resisting. All power to all friends and water protectors in North Dakota. I'm Tom Swiftbird, and I'm signing out.